in eastern counties.
Heavier rain starting around about 3 or 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, and it's going to see very heavy downpours right throughout Wednesday morning. It could become a little bit drier through the middle of the day on Wednesday and Wednesday evening, and then we're going to see more heavy rain push up across the southeast and the east throughout Wednesday late evening and through Wednesday night as well.
And that's your news for now.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Stuck for a present? Give a Ryanair gift card and they love you forever.
Rain in most areas tonight with a chance of flooding in some areas. Lows of 7 to 11 degrees generally. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
The winning streak continues. Daniel Dunn from Galway became our 6th consecutive winner when he picked up the phone today with the right number. The cash machine's been reloaded. The amount you need to know is €20,135.56. So text play to 57557. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock tomorrow. And then across the Go Loud network of stations, Barry Dunn will make the call. If your phone rings, answer within 5 rings. Give us the exact amount in euro and cents and the cash is yours. So the new number again is €20,135.56. Over 18s only. Text cost €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You are playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Terms and conditions on newstalk.com.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Oh.
Daniel McDonnell of the Irish Independent. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
This is bringing back memories.
Yeah, back in the old studio. Yeah, well, it's newer looking than it was the last time we would have been in here talking.
We mentioned earlier on, if you're just tuning in, our Off the Ball studios, as you know and love them, listeners, you'll see them on your social feeds. They're being upgraded currently. And so we're in the News Talk studios, which is where you and I used to have many a conversation.
It's novelty. Yeah. So you've been in here doing you've done a couple of current affairs cameos, haven't you? So
sure have, yeah.
You look quite comfortable in that seat. Not like you could just start talking about the economy at any second.
Answer the question, Minister.
Yeah,
that's all this is.
That's basically what you need to do. Yeah,
we've lots to get through. Duffer, let's talk Duffer.
Damian Duff's Shelbourne in the FAI Cup final.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose. Like in February when he wasn't appointed in February, he was appointed around this time last year, I suppose. But when the season started on February, there was an element of how's this going to go? It's gone really well, Yes, they're like 7th, I think, in the table. They're not going to probably finish any higher. But like when you think about his, like maybe when you cover it all the time, as I have been, like you don't really, you just get used to it, and that's the thing. Like I mean. There was this big fanfare around, Duffer at the start, and the first game was televised and all. But, he's just in some ways he's just slotted into the League of Ireland scene quite sort of comfortably. Like not everything is a big talking point. You can go to a Shells game and to be a handful of press lads talking to him, and that's it.
No, it's not like Roy Keane proportions.
No,
he has settled in.
Not at all. Very, very, and like in a way, like some people who probably didn't know him, and I'm not pretending to know him either. But some people didn't know him, but were like, he's gonna jack it in. He's gonna, he'll be gone in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. And you kind of forget that actually he was working at underage League of Ireland level for the last couple of years and had shown a sort of his ability to dedicate himself to something, and that's what he's done. And I suppose for people who haven't seen Shells this year, haven't followed their story, like he's actually built a team that is very unified, like very sort of they have a little bit of a siege mentality thing probably going on. He's promoted some younger players across the season that is a very different team at the end of the season than the start of it. But the guy who scored the goal on Sunday for him, Gavin Molloy, wasn't in the first team at the start of the season, and he's been a real sort of breakout star. He's from Richard Dunn's great sporting family, like Theo Dunn would be his grandfather and stuff, and But anyway, like he's just done a really good job in a very sort of, I wouldn't say understated, because he's met his headlines, and he's as he said himself the other day, he rants and he raves, and he's very animated, and like other fans have been round up by him at many occasions, like. the Shells fans have this song that they sing from now, where it's like to the tune of "Zombie" by the Cranberries. So it's like in your head, Duffer, and it's because at various times he said things that have annoyed Bows fans or annoyed Pats fans, but they've got good results against them, and he's going to the Aviva. Like, you think about it, like, he's one of Ireland's greatest ever players, won 100 caps. He was this sort of beloved duffer, you know, likes to sleep, and his reputation as a player was one of does he take this, not that does he take it seriously, but you know what I mean, it was very much like his natural ability. And now next month he's going to be standing in the Aviva as a manager, and there's something pretty cool about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
they'll go in as big underdogs.
They will. Yeah, he'll be up against Derry City and Murray Higgins, who would both have been two members of Stephen Kenny's initial backroom staff on the sideline as it happened, so they would have worked together for a spell, a very sort of brief spell for a couple of months. Higgins was the chief scout, an analyst when Duff was Kenny's number 3 or whatever his technical term was.
There's not a club around that doesn't have a former member of Stephen Kenny's
if you don't have one, are you even a club? But there's a nice bit of beef between Shells and Derry as well too, because I was at the most recent game between them.
Is there a pairing in the League of Ireland that there isn't a nice bit of beef between?
Yeah, UCD and everyone else.
Okay.
There's no UCD grudge match. Right. I mean, aside from that, no. Like it's like the old FAI. Someone threw a bread roll at someone back in the day. But the Shells Derry one, after the most recent game between them, they're actually playing in the league this Friday, and Derry are sort of in the title race now, so it's quite a big game. But the previous game, Derry got what might prove to be a very important 92nd minute goal at Talca Park to win. And all the games this season between them, like Shells were the first team to beat Derry up in the Brandywell at the start of the season, and they've just had a nice little niggle. But it was quite a friendly niggle on, I think, the most recent game where Derry scored in the 92nd minute. And Damian Duff came down afterwards and started giving out about, well, there's teams in this league that have got a wage bill 3 or 4 times the size of us. Now that drove a lot of other managers mad in the league, because they're like, no, Shells isn't bad. Are you saying that our budget is this? But you kind of thought this was a little bit of press, saying something in the press to get a bit of a reaction. Apparently the Derry players afterwards were in the dressing room, and I think Damian Duff might have made comments towards the dressing room about you're celebrating this when your wage bill is this. And I think the Derry players turned the music up a little bit louder to celebrate. So nice little bit of beef. Nice little bit of beef there. Good. And that's what you want. Storylines. So that's what we're going to have one coming up the next month.
Yeah, well, that is befitting Showpiece Day. That is great.
Yeah, it'll be good. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Sunday Times Sports section front page, Paul Rowan exclusive. I mean, this is just something. I don't think this has kind of been picked up massively, and maybe to some extent it's much ado about nothing. But at the same time, I think it's significant. So Paul Rowan had the exclusive in the Sunday Times. It was the front page of their sports section over the weekend. And it's Roy Barrett, FAI chairman for the last 3 years or so. Basically, he wrote an email to board members, and he is fed up with the leaks, and he's fed up with the briefings to journalists against Stephen Kenny. And the Sunday Times got to see this email. So it was sent on October 1st. This was 4 days after the win against Armenia, the 3-2 win against Armenia. So what Roy Barrett is saying is, the Irish Independent today writes, this is on October 1st. This was you, was it?
It was, yeah.
You wrote this?
Yeah.
Okay. The Irish Independent, Dan McDonnell, today writes that, quote, influential FAI figures with reservations about Stephen Kenny are more strident in bar rooms than in boardrooms. He says, the Daily Mail reports there is, quote, growing FAI anxiety, end quote. John Fallon, in the Irish Examiner, also alluded to growing concerns on the board of the performance of the team and Stephen. This is getting tiresome, and it reflects poorly on the board. Will those members who believe it's okay to express opinions to journalists on Stephen's or any other FAI staff member's performance please desist from doing this? You're letting everybody else on the board down, and it's just embarrassing at this point. We look like a pub team. That's really going to go down well with sponsors and government. Regards, Roy. So he's peeved. The Sunday Times piece, Paul Rowan's piece, did say that the email has caused some antagonism. Sources close to the board say they no longer wanted nodding dogs at the top of the association. The source also mentioned, and maybe this was the source of the conversations between board members and journalists, I don't know, but the source pointed out that a recent gathering of football journalists, politicians and senior FAI figures was attended not just by board members but by senior members of the executive as well. However, Barrett has been surprised at the number of leaks coming out of the association since he took the reins nearly 3 years ago. So it's not just about potentially this gathering or otherwise. It's not just about the most recent conversations between board members and journalists. He's surprised generally at the leaks coming out. So sent the email, and naturally enough, the email requesting leaks desist ends up on the front page of the Sunday Times sports section. Who have you been chatting to?
Where do you want me to go with this one,
Who's
Joe?
your source?
Where do you want me to go with this one?
What's your... Okay, I'll tell you exactly where I want to go. Because I'm not a news sourcing journalist.
There's an element of a media thing to this, right? But sorry, yeah.
I'm not a news sourcing journalist, so I have no idea how all this works, really. I read the pieces and I discuss them afterwards. I suppose what I would like to know, and therefore I hope the listener would like to know, is what is going on with the FAI board? Because it seems like there's this balance of power, or this fight for a balance of power, whereby a lot of the board, I think clearly Roy Barrett included, are very much behind Stephen Kenny and are trying to, you know, the days of everything being leaked and politicking and rancour going on, let's try and be more professional. And then there are some board members who are clearly still talking to journalists, and what's more, they're briefing against Stephen Kenny, or certainly they're saying they don't have faith in Stephen Kenny. And there's a tussle ongoing still in the FAI for a board which is aligned and together. The question, this doesn't seem like a board which is getting on very well. No, and I suppose if you look at the lifespan of this board, and you have to be a small bit careful about talking about this, in the sense that you almost end up going down the road of like, let's speculate who someone's sources might be on a story, you know, and that's always like a dangerous game. Whatever feelings or suspicions that you might have about something, it's still a weird discussion to have, right? But maybe to look at the makeup of this board. So there's 6 independent directors. Like, you know, at the end of John Delaney years, like all the board members were from the football family, inverted commas. They'd come through, you know, various leagues, committees, whatever, you know, how it all was played itself out. Yeah. That's been well documented. Yeah. Subsequently, there's been changes made as part of governance reforms and stuff that was brought in for the bailout there wasn't a bailout, and all the stuff to get the FAI out of financial issues. You now have 6 independent directors, and you have 6 football elected directors, i.e. they're coming from they're still coming from the football family, but their parish has been reduced. There would have been 2 League of Ireland reps, now there's 1, similarly with sort of grassroots and other particular roles. And within the lifespan of this board, there would have been at one point, I can't just quite remember off the top of my head when this was, but there would have been a statement released by the football elected directors. I don't know if you remember this, as having a go at Roy Barrett to do with the terms and conditions in which this bailout was agreed. And you had this very unusual situation where you have several members of the board signing a statement, sort of having a little bit of a pop at another side of the board. So there's been a little bit of tension there in a sense within the football elected of maybe, do we need all of these independent directors at times? You know, like, are we being pushed to the side? Are we being taken over and being run by these non-footballing people? Although, I mean, the independent directors now also includes Packy Bonner, for example. And it does include some people who maybe would have a very much business or HR or other backgrounds. So there's always been a little bit of a niggle there, I think, between sides. And I sometimes wonder the extent to which, like, around certain issues, are these just natural, are these fault lines appearing? You know, could I interrupt there and ask?
Sorry, it's a bit unwieldy in some ways.
No, I understand. So I'm not speculating here about who leaked. This could be one board member. This could be every single board member is talking to journalists. Who knows? Because it's genuinely not possible to tell from Paul Rowan's piece. But is it your sense that the independent members are more behind Stephen Kenny and the footballing family are less behind him, or does it even fall down around those lines?
It falls down a bit, but I suppose in terms of stronger voices on each side, you could say it goes that way.
Right.
Like, all right, Paul Rowan's piece to me and that letter, that made perfect sense to me in the sense that I didn't look at that and say, well, that's surprising. You know, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a gathering reference there. I have a pretty good idea what that gathering is. That's referenced. I'm not sure that was referenced in the letter, by the way. I think it's more a source thing around it. I don't think the letter, if I'm understanding, references a specific gathering. But certainly, and it's a weird one because Roy Barrett would be down, like, listed in a number of places, and we've just discussed it there. Very openly known as a big supporter of Stephen Kenny on the board. Yeah. I think quite a few people would be aware of board members who maybe have a few more reservations, who maybe in certain settings have probably talked openly enough about their reservations in such a way that it hasn't been discreet. So it wouldn't be a huge shock to people on the news beat as such. But these people don't necessarily get...
Are there many board members who are of a similar view, not so sure on Stephen Kenny?
I think there would be probably one or two louder voices, and I'm not sure about the rest. I don't know the board business on the rest. I mean, I will point out that, and I did write about this recently, how many times in the Stephen Kenny era have we been told, he's a game or two?
Yeah,
he's got
quite a bit.
And I mean, I did write that line about people being more strident in bar rooms than boardrooms. I can't deny it. To me, I think at times during the Kenny era, I think there's been a lot of tall talk in more private settings. But then when it comes down to it, you never get the sense that Kenny's been close to a heave at all. And maybe in time, we'll hear that that's the opposite. But there's been all these games. So if he doesn't finish third in the group, if they're not in contention going to November, and you have all these pieces appearing in pretty much in similar places, suggesting that if he's gone, he's gone. And the context of this particular week was, and the most recent one after the Armenia game, where again, it was a bad night at the Aviva, really bad night for Ireland at the Aviva. But then you had a lot of the same places that had previously talked about Stephen Kenny being a game or two from that, and are they maybe the same sources? Who knows? Who knows if that's the case? Again, it's like if Ireland starts slowly in March, he could be gone again. And it's like, how many times can this cat be almost killed off? And I don't know the extent to which Kenny has ever really been under that sort of pressure of that he's 2 games from the sack, or he's 1 or 2 games from the sack. I'm not personally convinced of that. But, people speak to different people and would have a different impression of things. But to bring back to the point, I mean, it looks terrible, right? It looks absolutely terrible.
That's Roy Barrett's point.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does look terrible. And, I mean, subsequently, I've tried to speak to people around this and, there's no real sort of news follow-up per se. It's something that happened. It's something that reflects a situation that exists. And you would think that if people are sort of have their reservations, they would be a little bit more careful about the setting in which to express them. But then in saying that, kind of journalists really complain about, board members talking. That's the way things work in that's how stories happen for years. So you feel like a bit of a sort of a prat taking a stand against it, because I'll be a hypocrite. I'll happily try and speak to board members to find out what they think about stuff.
Sure.
And to speak. So really, can't take too much of a stand on that.
Yeah. And board members in previous iterations under the Delaney era, broadly speaking, were they unwilling to speak to journalists? As in, you guys were the enemy. That was a united board.
Yeah. Well, I think that board. I mean, that board was it was 1 and 11.
Yeah.
What was that thing? What was that line? Nodding dogs might have applied to that time.
Yeah.
I think history would suggest that maybe that board. I think that the board now does have a little bit more of a balance in terms of views would be expressed upon it, but it doesn't. It's just you know what? It's just like the whole Kenny era generally. It's just all so fraught and so factioned. And so sort of draining to the point that you just feel like this was meant to be a lot more fun than this.
I had the same thought because he was on the show, Stephen Kenny, a couple of weeks ago. And you think about it, this is an Irishman who's done brilliant things in Irish football, who is clearly super hardworking, dedicated. I have no sense of every stone not being turned over several times. And yet even some of my questions are just so oh, it's not gone well though, and what about this, and what about the criticism, and what about that? And as you said, the reporting around it for much of the last year, and then the text message response even into shows and the online discussion, you kind of think this should just be a whole lot more enjoyable. Like, there's a lot of good things about this, and it is a pity that it is so fraught, to use your word.
It is, yeah. And you know, like, people on the board, like, by the way, like of course they're bloody entitled to have reservations if that's how they feel. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's like... That's what you want.
Roy Barrett's not saying you're not entitled to your opinion.
Absolutely. And like, it's right that they probably should always be having a review of like, you know, someone's performance and stuff. But I think, and I listened, I think you were on the Finney part the other day, I can't remember, was it in that discussion or a previous one, that someone made the point that like Kenny to a degree is working under this cloud a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Might have been Vinny who said that. And I do sort of agree with that point in the sense that, to me, I would say it's fair to say that Kenny is probably aware of a lot of this.
Yeah.
You know, even in his interview with you recently, like, he didn't necessarily get picked up on to a great degree, but like, he made a reference to sort of like he's fine with criticism, but not the agenda-based stuff.
Yeah.
And
well, that was the most interesting line in the whole interview.
Yeah,
and I asked him to elaborate, and he said no.
He wouldn't. But that sort of points to a mood that probably does exist, and with that probably comes a degree of, I suppose, like, this whole line is, I think did Barrett refer to it or not, you want to look a little bit more on the same page for all parties. You don't want to portray an image of instability. You don't want to portray an image of a sort of like you're not sure what you are. And I think that can lead to probably a degree of sort of unease or like lack of trust, you know. And I mean, the problem with Kenny is that he's had this from the start of his time in charge. And the Videogate nonsense, you know, which was weird, you know, very, very weird, and would probably naturally lead you to be suspicious around sort of where, you know, the extent of support that might exist internally. So then, if you're probably reading stuff which is sort of claiming, and it's from Roy Barrett, claiming that sort of board members have been, you know, telling board members to desist from speaking to journalists, it doesn't necessarily just present the image of the most sort of stable environment in which you can do the job to the, you know, to the best of your ability without being sort of weighed down by other thoughts. Now, of course, he has to block all that out too, but it's just been that way, hasn't it? It's just been a little bit civil war-y. You know, I hate using that term, but there's been aspects of that which would resonate.
The football show is brought to you by Sky. Watch Man United Spurs on tomorrow night, live only on Premier Sports. We're going to take a short break. Back with Dan in just 1 second.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games every weekend. Live on Sky.
This is News Talk. Moncrief.
So then they've all copped on to the fact that if they want something interesting to talk about on the rank, they all tune to Moncrief. But now when they go, did you hear about the Brazilian bum lift out in Chile? You're like, yeah, we all heard that, right? Because they're all listening to it.
Yeah. And then
it's their attempt to be eclectic.
Yeah, well, it is.
And it's also the reason why nobody else in the country could do your gig. It's impossible to imagine Matt Cooper doing Brazilian bum lifts or Pat Kenny, and I'm not even going to go there.
Moncrief.
Brought to you by Avant Money.
Weekdays at 2 p.m. on News Talk.
From cooperative roots to global success, Glanbia Ireland has come a long way. And now we have a new name for the future, Tirlawn. At Tirlawn, we value life in perfect balance. From the land we farm to the customers we serve, building on our heritage of wholesome nutrition, caring for our communities and for generations yet to come. We believe we can thrive only by working together. It's what sets us apart. Tirlawn, the new name for Glanbia Ireland.
Wild Lights, the spectacular nighttime experience at Dublin Zoo, is back with an exciting new theme, The Magic of Life. Experience over 1,000 dazzling lanterns shining a light on biodiversity. Travel through luminous woodlands to see amazing wildlife, discover the diversity of life in our rainforests, and dive underwater to witness beautiful sea creatures, all lit up through giant colourful silk lanterns. Wild Lights, from October 28th to January 9th. Tickets on sale now at dublinzoo.ie.
You may never have heard of him, but he was the man who risked his life
to help create the Ireland we know today.
You're only one mistake away from execution.
He was one of the most daring spies in Irish history.
Never was he more exposed or in danger.
His name was Ned Broy.
He suggested that Broy should meet Michael Collins directly.
All episodes of Belly of the Beast, a Go Loud original, are available now on the Go Loud app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Didn't know this car was diesel.
It's not.
At the garage you use the black pump. Diesel.
No idea. So, we're going to miss the flight, but sun holidays are overrated. All that sun and sand, who needs it, eh?
Where'd you use the black pump? Diesel.
No idea. So, I'll call Allianz Breakdown Assistance.
With Allianz Car Insurance, you can also add breakdown assistance. Save 15% when you get a quote online at allianz.ie. You write it, we underwrite it. Allianz. Allianz plc is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Standard acceptance criteria, policy conditions and a minimum premium apply. Breakdown assistance is an optional extra and an additional premium applies.
Paul agreed to bring his elderly neighbour shopping without realising she's such a devout middle aisle shopper. He now has to make space for his neighbour, a TV and a gazebo. Thankfully, Paul's new Citroën C5 Aircross SUV offers best-in-class boot space, 3 flat-folding individual rear seats, and all with advanced comfort technology. Comfy neighbours guaranteed. The new Citroën C5 Aircross SUV, as generous as you are. Visit citroen.ie.
Sustainability is no longer on the agenda, it is the agenda. The government has committed to reducing emissions, and for Irish businesses, that means taking action now. Enterprise Ireland's Green Transition Fund provides funding supports to build company capability, develop sustainability plans and invest in decarbonisation. Visit enterprise-ireland.com and make sustainability your business. The Green Transition Fund is an initiative of the Government of Ireland funded under the European Union's Recovery and Resilience Facility.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back. Dan McDonnell is staying with us. Very happy though to say that Kate Rowan of the Telegraph is with us on the line. Evening, Kate.
Evening, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, great. Good to have you with us. So we wanted to touch on Emma Hayes and her health, and she's gone very public with her health. Emma Hayes being, well, probably the best manager in the league across the Women's Super League. She's 46 years of age now. She's won the league 5 times with Chelsea. She's blown people away with her analysis on ITV at various major tournaments. And a little bit out of the blue, really, October 13th, she announced on Twitter that she'd undergone an emergency hysterectomy on account of her ongoing battle with endometriosis, and she's taking time out of the game and she's working from home. And I mean, there seems to be utter devastation on her behalf at Chelsea, and I mean, it's an amazing thing on her behalf to go so public as much as anything.
Yes, Joe. I mean, I wasn't surprised because I don't mean surprised. I was surprised at how public it was. But I did interview her about 18 months ago for the Telegraph about her battle with endometriosis. And I don't want this to turn into a medical show, but it's just to inform your listeners, it's a condition that affects 1 in 9 women, which is a lot of people. But there's very little known about it. And just without getting into the nitty gritty, it's a condition where tissue like the lining of the womb starts to grow in other places. So it could be in places that could affect fertility, like the fallopian tubes, or could be like on your stomach, which can play havoc. Or like I suffer from it too, and it grows on my sciatic nerve, so I have a lot of back pain, and that's but it's a really, really tricky illness to diagnose. And she was kind of one of the first people to be very public about it. It was always something you knew was there in women's sport, and there's been people in kind of the entertainment industry. But the fact, she could have just said she wasn't well. Yeah. She didn't have to say why it was. And I think I would imagine part of the reason, because it was the same way she didn't have to do an interview with me about it, and it was very personal, is because there's just so little awareness about it. And yet it's something that affects so many people, and the pain is crippling. And she's a fantastic role model, not just about how public she's been about her thing, but everything she has achieved. Like, they have doctors and scientists have been able to do research, and the kind of level of pain she and all the rest of us who suffer from it with is equivalent, believe it or not, to how someone feels after open heart surgery. And if you're living with that level of pain every day, and to be consistently the best manager in your league, and then to kind of break the glass ceiling in terms of being a pundit, you know what I mean, to be it wasn't like she was a token female, she was just excellent.
Yeah.
And the interview I did with her, she talked about how disturbed her life was and how awful she felt at times. And obviously she and she'd say herself, she was in a privileged position working in a high performance environment where she could get access to people, and but it's opened up a whole dialogue. And what I felt was really powerful was, it was obviously great to see the female players wearing Get Well Soon, Emma, but to see the male players do it too, that's going to get people talking about this illness. And like for me, it just, on a very personal level, as someone who works in sport, and this can be quite a disruptive thing. It was very touching to see the male players do it, because people are going to start saying, well, they mightn't know much about WSL, but they're going to say, what was wrong with her?
Yes.
And then they'll find out. And in reality, most people, I have found, when you tell people you have endometriosis, and I've just decided to be quite open about it when I'm working with people, and I get to know them, and I feel a level of trust regardless of their gender. They'll usually know someone who has it. And I think the other thing, I just think it's very, very powerful from her, and I think it could be a very game-changing moment in sport.
Yeah, because as you said, it is so incredibly common, and yet it isn't spoken about all that often. We had she's a bowler, a world-class bowler on the show in the last year, talking to us about her experience with endometriosis. I think that's the only time we've covered it on the show. I know, like, for instance, there's a massive push across UK media at the moment, and here as well, when it comes to menopause, but something, just as crippling and almost as common is something like endometriosis, which again, I don't think, you could say for sure everybody has an awareness of.
No, and like I said, some people you will talk to and they'll know someone who has
Yeah.
it. They won't necessarily be experts on it, but there'll be some level of empathy, and that's why we need to talk about it. And that's why I think her going public is so important, because it's as common as type 1 diabetes. And we would have a level of empathy if you had a colleague, Joe, or there was a sports person, and we'd be going, oh wow, like Henry Slade. I'm very much talking from my English,
Yeah,
covering English rugby, but like Henry Slade, fantastic player for England, is type 1 diabetic, and he rightfully gets a lot of credit for doing what he does, and monitoring his insulin, and I've interviewed him about that, but the endometriosis sufferers are just as common, and I think because of, like I said, the kind of nature of the disease, people are worried about maybe getting a bit squeamish, and then also just there hasn't been very much research, and we're only kind of getting to a place where people are realizing that it's a whole month illness. It's not just around your time of your period, so it's a bigger thing, and I think this can only be a good thing. And there are a lot more women in sport. When Emma did the interview with me, I was really, it's kind of one of those, I did it for March of last year. So March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and it was kind of one of those kind of slow burners. It kind of went online. You're kind of like, how will this go in a sports section of a pretty traditional? And then it just kind of took off on social media, and it was pretty high profile sportswomen saying, I have this.
Yes. Because I have to say, one of my first experiences, even just reading about it, oddly, was in Conversations with Normal People. Sally Rooney, one of the protagonists in that book, has it. But again, it's not something that crops up all that often. So Emma Hayes has, I think, done a great service to many people. And one of the reasons we wanted to touch on it, I was very, genuinely very moved by an interview she gave just last month to Donald McRae. So she had gone through the most horrific time where, and I appreciate this could be very triggering for anybody who's gone through difficulties with childbirth, so just be warned. And she was talking about how she's had 4 years almost of not feeling good. So her son Harry was born, it says in the piece, half an hour before Hayes had given birth to his twin brother Albie, who had died inside her after 28 weeks. This is in the conversation she had with Donald McRae. And so what she was saying, and this is just last month, I feel the best I've felt since before I gave birth, because the last 4 years I haven't been right. When I knew I was only going to deliver one live baby, I hadn't actually contemplated I still had to deliver two. I just needed to get Harry into the world healthy. But I realise now why women take a year off work after childbirth, because I didn't prepare for the significant hormonal, physical and emotional challenge. And she said of losing Albie, that moment will never leave me. I feel sad for Harry, who doesn't have a brother. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt now, but I accept it. I still have a cry about it every birthday and Christmas. That's normal. But for those first 4 years, I was just trying to survive. I felt exhausted. But I woke up when Harry turned 4 this May. And that was the first time I thought, I'm back. So, yeah, you couldn't not be moved and impressed and blown away by this person. So I was just so sad to see, that the difficulty less than a month later and the tough time that she's going through. Because the other thing she said was, Kate, she said, my biggest regret from that time was coming back to work after 8 weeks. Nothing to do with the club, because how do you step away from your job as a football manager for a year? What if they bring in an interim coach and after 8 months they say, we'll stick with him or her? So even like at that time, she was acutely conscious of her, not unique, but, very unusual professional role. And so her being off work now, that's not something she's doing easily. She didn't even take much time off when she went through that trauma 4 years ago.
No, and I think that's like the thing about people with endometriosis, different trials and fertility and what she went through is one very significant thing. And I think, for her to speak so openly about that, and then she's also spoken very openly about her day-to-day struggles, which, like, you imagine if a manager in the Premier League was that open about stuff, we'd be really talking about it. If they had an illness and they said, there's some days I just, I'm just in an awful lot of pain and I really just don't feel great. I mean, that was my interview, kind of took a different angle, was more about the illness. And then what she said to Donald McRae. But if you put all that together and you imagine, and this isn't me trying to be a crazy feminist, but you imagine if that was one of her opposite numbers on the men's side, people would be top of the news, it'd be top of the sports news. So she's going out on a bit of a limb, because often people, when they have this, and I think she's doing a huge thing for women in sport, because when she did the interview with us, one of her players, Beth England, shared it and said, I have endometriosis. And that was just, people, that was like a very public thing to do. Yeah. But she gave her player the confidence. And I think, I think it's going to open, I think it's going to open it up, because particularly in England, where football is, is just flipping everywhere, and it's and people know her. She's gone beyond the women's sports space. Yeah. It has a real meaningful. I don't know. I think it could hopefully change. It'll make people more open. Certainly, I have found since her intervention, more people are talking about it, and people are asking questions, and definitely, you talk about the character in Sally Rooney's book, that did a bit, but I think when it's no disrespect to that was good, but sport, because it's macho and all those kind of things, for someone to kind of come. It just well, for me, I was just very, very moved by it, and having interviewed her. Okay, well, my interview was a different type of thing to what Don McRae talked about, but to have her talk about like how much pain she's in, and to talk about like the different kind of things she has to do. And I think that's a big thing, is that it affects people in different ways. That just because she lost, not everyone loses a child, not everyone. Fertility can be a big issue for some women. For other people, fertility is just, they just want to survive the pain. So it'll open up hopefully lots of different kind of that it's not like that. There's lots of different stories, and she was very aware of that when I spoke to her 18 months ago. Like, she was very, very aware that, like, that she was doing it, and I gave her space just to talk about how it affected her on a day-to-day basis. And before that, the reason I knew about it was about just before COVID. So in kind of February 2020, I'd gone to Cobham, and it was to do a thing about how Chelsea were the sports scientists nearly killed me over this for generalizing it, but basically we're the first club to kind of publicly say they were tailoring their training around female players, the women obviously, menstrual cycles. And Emma Hayes, mentioned her endometriosis in that, and you could see that was something that, like, that she could see that these kind of things has a real impact, and didn't want it to stop someone's career, because it can have a huge impact on people's careers, and whole lives, social lives, every aspect of your life.
Trying to normalise it.
Yeah, it's trying to normalise it. And I think I was, do you know what? It was just a sense of, I don't want to make it about me, but it's just a sense of relief. And to see, like I said, as well as that interview she did, that excellent interview about the loss, to see male footballers having get well soon about a woman who's had a hysterectomy is incredibly powerful. And that's the kind of change we need, because the only way, like, there's no cure for it, Joe. The only way we can start to make things better, and I'm like, this is getting a bit off sport, but is for there to be that high awareness. And it was like when Marcus Rashford, talked about child hunger, people did something about it, and people discussed it, and that's that's where you're at in England. You need someone at that kind of Premier League level, and if you have Premier League footballers saying get well, Emma, I think that's and some of those difficult, like you're saying, some of those things could be triggering for people to hear around the child, which is just one part of it. I think is, but a very, very sad and important part of it. But it'll hopefully open up more dialogue, and that's we talk a lot, and you talk about the moments where sport does so much good and lifts us up, and this is an off the field example where it is very sad, but something very good is coming of it.
Yeah, no, it's courageous. Well, we wish her well. Kate, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about all that.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you very much. Thanks
Appreciate
for having me, Joe.
Kate Rowan there. Thanks, Kate, from the Telegraph. We'll take a short break.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch all the football you love, including the biggest Premier League games every weekend. Live on Sky.
This is News Talk.
It's over.
Go, don't look back. Go get your life back on track. Though there's hurt, though there's pain, this car can't compete with the train. I drove you away, I wasted your time. You told me we've come to the end of the line.
Break up with your car. Love 20% off fares with Ian Road Aaron.
Part of the Transport for Ireland network.
Inside your Volkswagen is something precious. It is engineering, genuine parts, technical expertise. It is your Volkswagen's DNA. It is so precious that 8 out of 10 Irish drivers would pay more for a Volkswagen serviced by Volkswagen expert technicians. Help protect your Volkswagen's DNA and its resale value. Book your classic service from only €199 at volkswagenservice.ie. Terms and conditions apply.
Volkswagen.
Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I need to upskill.
Then do the ICT SkillNet certificate in AI.
Is it online?
Yeah, 12 weeks part-time with live lectures and one-to-one mentoring.
Expensive?
No, it's part-funded. Apply at ictskillnet.ie.
Eligibility criteria apply. This programme is part funded by the Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet through SkillNet Ireland.
If you need urgent care, Beacon Hospital's emergency department is open Monday to Saturday. In advance of attending, we offer a phone triage system to reduce waiting times. Our emergency department is supported by over 2,000 staff and is home to Ireland's most advanced diagnostic equipment. For urgent care, call our ED on 01 293 9999. This is modern medicine. This is Beacon Hospital. For opening hours, visit beaconhospital.ie.
Tyrone Ryan plays football professionally for Ireland, but he's never played in a stadium.
When he won that all-important game, there were no fans to greet him at Dublin Airport, no open-top bus parade around the city, but that's not important to him. Team Wild's Tyrone Ryan is one of Ireland's top esports players, and what he needs is broadband he can rely on. That's where Virgin Media come in. Bring your A game with 99.9% broadband reliability. Virgin Media, bring on amazing.
T's and C's apply, subject to availability. Network reliability, see virginmedia.ie/proof.
Love swimming? Love it with a level head. Learn about weather, tides and rip currents. Be visible with a brightly coloured hat and tow float. Swim parallel to shore and never alone. Afterwards, get warm quickly. This is Water Safety Ireland. Better safe than sorry. For open water swimming advice, visit watersafety.ie. Supported by the Government of Ireland.
What would I do on holiday in Northern Ireland? The Ulster Museum is a bit of everything. Art, natural exhibitions, and if you're into history, Crumlin Road Jail is fascinating. Montalto Estate is perfect for nature walks. Oh, and chat with the fishermen at Loughnane Tours about a fresh catch for dinner. Have you stayed in the further space pods at Glenarm Castle? Always wanted to myself.
When you go on holiday, you want to see it how the locals see it. Plan that much-needed getaway and get local recommendations at discovernorthernireland.com. Northern Ireland, a small step to a giant adventure.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live only on Sky Sports.
This is News Talk.
You're very welcome back. Football show. Joe Hodge on for Wolves.
Yeah,
it's getting serious.
It's his third Premier League appearance now.
In a row.
Yeah, they I don't know if you saw it the weekend. You may not have, because it was such a brief cameo. He came on in injury time at the weekend against Forest, and he nearly cut a player in half for the end, like a sort of a Paul Scholes style tackle. But yeah, it's like he's getting 32 minutes. I think they're 2-1 down to Crystal Palace now. But I know Steve Davis, the caretaker manager, you kind of wonder, is he well disposed towards players coming up? Trying to give them as much opportunity as possible. And will it change if a new permanent manager comes in? But I mean, he's a very promising player. Joe Hodge, he always has been perceived that way. And I mean, I remember at the start of the season, I wrote a piece about maybe I could see maybe 6 Irish Premier League players, playing regularly this season, and I was like, who's the 7th going to be? I have no idea who that might be, and I'll be honest, I didn't have Hodge on my radar to be the one that would have Evan Ferguson or maybe a couple others higher up the list to get minutes, but yeah, he skipped right above them, and he's doing well.
Greg Cunningham scored the winner for Preston this evening away to Huddersfield. We were both just saying during the ad break, he unfortunate in some respects. Greg Cunningham, such a talented player when he came on the scene. The leg break at a tough time. Yeah, no, definitely. You never know with these lads who were at the super clubs young, although City wasn't as super then as it is now. But yeah, just one of these careers that nearly, I mean, still a great career by the level of, from someone from Galway, going and making a living at a very good level. Yeah. But probably just didn't quite cross that threshold to like excellent career, if you know what I mean. And he had talent. Talent. Clock is against me. I want to see, am I misreading this Eddie Howe thing? So, not sure that you are, Joe, but maybe the Jurgen Klopp press conference from Friday has spawned 1,000 controversies. So the most bizarre aspect, I think, of the whole weekend is that Manchester City are now briefing journalists to say that Klopp's observations were borderline xenophobic, which Klopp has had to deny today that he's xenophobic. This is, Klopp effectively had just said there are 3 clubs in world football who can do what they want financially. He was asked about this, by the way. He didn't just say, forget your questions, I need to come in and go on this rant. He was asked about it. I was almost weary when he was asked. He said, okay, you know what I'm going to say. So this is xenophobia. There are 3 clubs in world football who can do what they want financially. It's legal, everything's fine, but they can do whatever they want. Competing with them, it's not possible to deal with that, as in their financial muscle. And so City have said that these comments played a massive role in the Man City team bus being attacked and Pep Guardiola having coins thrown at him and various issues, and they've said it's Klopp's borderline xenophobia, which is just odd in the extreme that we give that the time of the day. So that's one aspect. But Eddie Howe has decided to step up to the plate. The Eddie Howe situation, what happened here is the sporting director at Newcastle, Dan Ashworth, he said there's no ceiling for the club. They've spent 210 million sterling so far in 2 transfer windows. it was put to Klopp that Dan Ashworth of Newcastle, their sporting director, had said there's no ceiling. And Klopp said, he's absolutely right. There is no ceiling for Newcastle. Congratulations. But some other clubs have ceilings. So you would think, in the same way that Pep felt a bit undermined by the, well, it's all down to the money point,
Yeah.
Eddie Howe, I suspect, bristled. And on the back of Jurgen Klopp losing his composure, we can safely say, on the touchline
Yeah.
at Anfield, Eddie Howe has now gone for the think of the children routine. So Eddie Howe is taking a stand. He won't take a stand about some things, but this he will. So he has said of the Jurgen Klopp situation and the behaviour, I'm very aware that I'm going to be looked at by millions and millions of people, especially children. And I think you have an expectation to make sure the game is upheld in the right way, with the right spirit. I'm certainly aware of my demeanour and behaviour on the touchline. Also, my players are looking at me, and what are they going to think of me? I'm not going to be able to help them in the moment if I'm not in control of my emotions. I've got no issue with celebrating. It's more going the other way, losing my temper or losing control in a negative and aggressive way. I try not to do that.
Yeah.
So, like this is Eddie, who I mentioned in the last hour with the lads on a slight tangent. When he took the job in November 2021, he had nothing to say about this grotesque sports washing operation which is underway. And I know people are fatigued with the talk of it, but when you stop and think about it, it's just outrageous what's happening in football and at Newcastle. And then fast forward after he took the job in November 21 to March of this year, and this was the weekend of the 81 executions in a weekend. And at that stage, Eddie said he was still reading up, his words, reading up on the situation in Saudi Arabia. I'm football obsessed. I prefer to stick to what I know. Hugely proud to represent the club. And he said, again, there's a degree of kind of hubris here. He said, I'm still reading up on the situation in Saudi Arabia. However, he did want to point out to the journalists, I was a footballer, though, with a slight difference. I was 19 or 20 at Bournemouth, getting on the team bus with the Times under my arm. The Times, Dan. Times under my arm, and getting some very strange looks from my, in brackets, idiot teammates. The idiot wasn't part of it.
No, of course, he's the thinking man's footballer.
But I come from a family where things were pushed towards me, and I was quite interested in world politics. I had a little more time when I was playing to actually look into it. Now that I'm management, your time is such a scarce resource. That's not to say I don't keep up to date, but clearly I couldn't comment. I couldn't say a single word about
Still reading up on
the
it.
Saudi situation.
Maybe his page is still refreshing.
Look, I made the point earlier. I understand his predicament with commenting on Saudi Arabia. However, to then go today and do the old, Jurgen, think of the children routine.
There's a trade-off with Newcastle. It's like it's like the live golfers complaining about certain things, and it's like, well, you were paid extra money to compensate you for some of these difficulties you're suffering, and don't go on to us about growing the game or something, like you sort of know you know the deal. Part of the deal with the Newcastle thing is you just can't take the moral high ground.
Well, he's on it.
There's a clause where it's like there's a no moral high ground clause in your contract. It's like moral high ground. Eddie, I believe you're a well-read man. You once read the Times, I'm told. You had it under your arm. You liked world politics.
You told us.
Sadly, as part of this deal, you're no longer told. You just stay clear of it. Do not take the moral high grounds in any situation. But there you go.
He's the only person out there thinking of the world's children.
I mean, he is thinking like, he's just looking at Jurgen Klopp on the side and going, "This man is the walking embodiment of all that's grotesque about football today." Someone passionately shouting. And to be honest, right, I'm not a Liverpool fan. Sometimes Klopp, like people like salivate. There's a sort of a class of sort of middle-aged Liverpool supporting male of a certain age who just loves Jurgen Klopp. They want him to adopt their family or something. They absolutely love him, and everything he says is hilarious. And Klopp is a bad loser. He can be annoying. He can be irrational, like all great managers.
Yeah.
Really, like Eddie Howe taking a stand on Jurgen Klopp's sideline behaviour. What Jurgen Klopp said last Friday about the clubs with no seating is correct.
Yeah.
I don't think you can argue with that at all. But Eddie's getting paid for this. This is the deal. This is the deal. You just go out and you face it and you deal with it.
He's not angry, Jurgen. He's just disappointed. Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent Football Show, brought to you by Sky. You can see Spurs Man United tomorrow live on Premier Sports. OTB AM back with you tomorrow morning 7:30. Tom Dunn on the way.
This is News Talk, the home of the Pat Kenny Show. IMRO Current Affairs Show of the Year.
Not everything is going up in price, At Screwfix, we're cutting thousands of prices and price locking hundreds of